And good morning. Welcome to the Old School Podcast, a podcast about the American education system. Although we have been known to dabble in different things, as we will today. With me is my good friend, Dr. Stephen Bourgeois. Good morning, sir.
Hey Miller, it's good to see you. It's like meeting you again for the first time. Um, and and I say that because you've been on a bit of a delay for the last 5 or 6 months. We were on a different platform. We had a little bit of technology gap, and I didn't want to say it because I didn't want to hurt your feelings. But now, I mean, you've done something quite remarkable. You have a direct line to the World Wide Web, and this is downright crisp. And it just makes me think, he's a lot smarter than I really thought he was.
Listen, I have you know that poor performance often affects guys our age, and
Oh, come on now.
sometimes it just, you just you have to you have to kind of prepare for it and deal with it. And so,
Let's take it right in that direction here, Miller. But-
so yes, I am plugged in, as it were, I'm to the wall. And
Yeah, it's too bad we can't plug in, all the time.
but now, so we'll see if the problems were such, um, as you heard last week's episode with Dr. Fingers. That was a mess, a shambolic exercise to be sure, but hopefully it is something that we have now correct it, and we will be back on the straight and narrow on a regular basis, dispensing wisdom, offering insight, asking questions, and not expecting an answer because sometimes the greatest questions do not necessarily provide its own answers. So it's more the discussion that's more important. Wouldn't you agree, Dr. Bourgeois?
Oh, thank you for that, here, Miller. Well, being heard, technically we're dealing with a technological platform, and the our audience will have heard about a half of the brilliance of Dr. Alex Fingers, and then we tried to piece another recording, and we maybe user error on our part or my part. We don't need to get too specific, um, but we ended up tacking on an ending, and but we'll do part two with Dr. Fingers, and he's a frequent guest anyway. But there was some wisdom that we lost because of technology, and that just bothers me. I mean, the idea of saying anything that's not recorded, it's haunting because all of these things are just they disappear. Unless you're of a philosophical bent that everything comes back somehow in our memories or whatever, but all of this wisdom not recorded, and we lost 23 minutes last week.
There probably is something to the idea that the wisdom is still there. It is that the audience is not there. And so maybe it is something that can be recreated, or at the very least, a close proximity thereof. And so in future episodes with Dr. Fingers, perhaps we will once more, if not the exact same wisdom that you and I, were fortunate to listen to last time, though the listeners not, maybe some wisdom on some other topic. And so wisdom, nevertheless, if not the same wisdom.
That's right. We sopped it up, and now we're bringing it to everybody else. If only we could have been broadcasting from your little um, Honda Fit, that little car that you drove, where we went to work together for about what 5 years,
Yeah.
morning and afternoon, and those conversations, again, they're no longer, they are no longer. But imagine the wisdom as we were developing our friendship and our philosophy and deepening an understanding and talking about all kinds of nonsense, but coming to the point where these two voices started to merge in thinking. I mean, imagine that, and that's all gone. It's not never recorded.
It may be gone, but the product of it is front and center.
That's right. I like that. You're quite the optimist today with your high speed internet.
Well, one of the things that we had talked about, the way in which technology has changed us, and not necessarily in the most serious of ways, but still a significant way, happens to do with the fact that, both of us are audiophiles. Would you agree to that characterization?
Audiophiles, yes.
Yeah.
We love not only music, but how the music is presented matters also.
And so if you are younger than our target demographic or our typical demographic, you may have heard the line before that we have lost something because albums no longer exist. And we talked about, one on one. We talked about the idea of how we change, how changes in how we consume music changes how music impacts us or affects us. And so, with that in mind, I thought we would first give a shout out to those albums that we find to be the most significant, the most impactful as far as we were growing up, and then segue that into how it has changed and what that might be bringing, whether it be good or bad. What do you think?
It sounds like two very old people um, talking about their youth and thinking, boy, what has
Back in the day.
uh, so there's nothing magical about the record or the album, the full length album that has about 25 minutes on one side and about 25 minutes on the other side. It replicates potentially a portion of a concert, maybe what we used to call in jazz a set. You play for about an album's worth of time when you're playing some jazz, and then you take a break and drink, and then you come back and play another set, which would be another album basically. So there's something to that. You can consume it in one sitting quite often. Um, but imagine having all these different tracks, so maybe five or six or four, whatever different length tracks within that side of the album. Then you flip it over and so these are put there maybe for a reason, but so much of pop music particularly is just a bunch of songs, and then you listen to them and you maybe like two or three of them, and the other you kind of can't really pass them by because you would have to lift the needle and move that. And so you often listen to some things that maybe didn't make it on the radio. And maybe that was a good thing, but there was a rhythm to that where you could hear, you knew which song came next. And so these became valuable to us personally. And if I were to throw one out there that you may not expect, um,
Okay.
um, something that I wore out and I still have it over there in that closet was an album by Carole King uh, called Tapestry, and it had incredible songs one after the other. And I remember if I stayed home from school for some reason, I'd listen to that record, both sides, and then do it again and again. And I had a few others like that, but that was one of them. And then as an adult, she had an incredibly soulful voice. She was a songwriter, a pop writer, but there was something about her soulfulness of her piano playing and her voice that just hit. And so that was
Mhm.
a perfect moment, a perfect time. And a lot of those songs nobody knows about because they didn't listen to them in an album. They hear You've Got a Friend that, So Far Away, a few things that the world knows about, but there are some others nobody hears. And the whole thing makes a wonderful point.
Well, I think well, first of all, she is a beautiful songwriter and singer, and she does know how to capture, emotions. And so I can completely agree with the idea because my initial education, a little bit in jazz, but a lot of rock. I'm gonna go with the rock uh, element to it. And I'll leave the jazz in your capable hands. But I would think that one of the albums that was probably one of the first ones that I really wore out was Exile on Main Street by the Stones. So the Stones were kind of like they were my first group, and there's nothing like your first love, and oftentimes that love does not last, and it becomes more the memory of love. But there was something about the Stones that stuck with me, and they stick with me today, and they are my favorite group today. This album, I did not consume this album when it came out. I think it came out like in '72. Um, and but even Keith Richards said it was the greatest thing they ever did. But I think what it is like it's a gritty, it's a dirty, it is a kind of constrained, not it's like a constrained energy, and the atmosphere of the album is directly influenced by the city where they recorded it. They recorded it in New York City. This was part of a group of albums that were done like in the early to mid '70s, where the Stones were basically spending a lot of time kind of absorbing what New York City had. And so whether you're talking about, something like Tumbling Dice, which was, it's just a cool kind of, as the Rolling Stone magazine called it, like a cool shuffle kind of a thing. Torn and Frayed, there's like hints of country, and then you just have this kind of really upbeat rock kind of bar rock kind of thing like you get with Happy or you get with Rocks Off or something like that. It's an album that it will change you, and it changed me, and it was probably the first Rolling Stones album that I heard in its entirety. That's why I think a lot of times I don't listen as much to the early Stones, just because the early Stones they were dealing with the Beatles, and unfortunately sometimes they sounded like them until they really started to kind of find their own voice. And once they started finding their own voice, they got a little bit edgier, and then they got a little bit more interesting. It's one of the reasons why I don't ever think of the Beatles as an interesting group. Certainly they're a good one, but I don't think of them as interesting in the way that I think about the Stones. But there was something about that album, that the album cover itself was there was all these different images on it. It was something you just sat there and looked at for like hours on end and tried to kind of figure out. So for me, that was probably one of the albums that struck with me the most.
I can't just leave the Beatles hanging like that after and you're being about as gentle as you've ever been talking about the Beatles. But I would say that one of the albums, that is an album and meant to be an album was Sergeant Pepper's, because the songs followed each other, and sometimes there were transitions intentionally from one to the other. But as you hear them, you know which song is gonna follow. And so anytime you hear one of those on the radio, you're just waiting in that silence for the next one to play. And of course it builds up until a song you will agree is a great song, which is A Day in the Life. And it
Yeah.
and but it's placed at the end of that because it builds up to that. And they're doing this tapestry, I guess you could call it. It's actually an interesting term. Sometimes they look at newspaper articles, little featurettes, small things, little pieces of reality or whimsy, but they make this point that comes together in that one song. So everything seems to lead to that. There are great songs in there as well. Um, but it's kind of them at the height of their powers, not as a rock and roll band playing live on a roof, though they can do that. But it was a combination of that and also what they did in the studio, which is where they were at their best. But just such a variety of songs, uh, lyrics that um, n- really ambitious, but meant to be an album. And I think that's what started the idea of an album that made sense from beginning to end, as opposed to a record that you listen to the 2 minutes and 35 seconds.
To justify my attitude about the Beatles, are the Beatles one of those rare groups who make better music on their own than they did as a group? You listen to like George Harrison albums, or you listen to Paul McCartney albums, or you listen to stuff that Ringo Starr has done over the years. I wonder if as a group, because of the time that they were in, they were kind of forced down this particular path, and the Stones started down this path. It's kind of bubblegum pop kind of stuff that has a bunch of screaming girls who aren't really even listening to the music.
You're doing it
And
again.
was that?
You're doing it again here, Miller.
I have such respect for the Beatles
Good.
as individual musicians.
But everything but I hear but and then
I like everything but their core essence.
yeah, otherwise you love them. Um, well, I think the answer is they did some incredibly powerful and wonderful music after they broke up, for sure.
Mhm.
But they were better together, and I think particularly McCartney and Lennon did they they were they tempered each other, and I think Lennon particularly gave McCartney an edge which he needed because he would get to a little bit of the Broadway comedy type schlock a little bit. There was a song called "It's Getting Better." It's getting better. Have to, and then what Lennon put in was a single line, and it can't get no worse. And that's an example of how they tempered each other. Um, and
So Lennon's cynicism helped moderate some of McCartney's Pollyanna
but then
traits.
McCartney could get incredibly dark. And if you want the essence of the Beatles, it, besides the lyrics and some of the crazy stuff they did, it's actually the backup vocals. Listen
Mhm.
to particularly Lennon and Harrison together and their blend and what they do. It's almost like they're telling the story in a different way as back. So they rethought what backup singing was. It wasn't just the Supremes and making supporting, but they were sometimes anticipating lines before. Very complicated. But also there's a progression with the Beatles, and you're right. The early Beatles were a bunch of dance songs, but then they went into more. They became songwriters, and they became great songwriters. And then at the very very end with Let It Be, they became a band again. And so I think you listen to everything, and you might listen to them with new ears at some point, and give them credit that they were a band.
We're a band. I think if they had lasted 5 more years,
Mhm.
I think that their craftsmanship would have outshone some of the sillier aspects of, as good as I want to hold your hand is. I mean, but as far as that segment of their career, and then the latter half of it when they were hanging out with Maharajis and what have you, that part is a little bit more interesting than what was before. So if that part had made up the bulk of their career instead of the end of it, I think for me the Beatles would have hit differently.
Mhm.
But
We need a day.
you,
We need a
huh?
day here. We need to take a day. I mean, the temptation now, and this maybe gets to the point of our podcast, is that I can make you a playlist on
Yes.
Spotify of all the best Beatles songs. There'll probably be about 65 of them, one better than the next. And something would be created by that would be very positive because suddenly you would say, "Oh, Steve's right," because these are just great songs, and maybe there will be a few that you don't know that well because I think I know more Beatles than you do, and you'd say, "Wow, what I never knew." So first of all, I'm going to do that, just like you're going to do the same for the Stones and ones that you think are that I should hear.
Well,
Uh,
first of all, I have already made that list of the Stones for myself. So
well,
I
well,
so
but
I have so I but I am excited
yeah,
to, because I had a friend of mine that was a huge Beatles fan that I used to work with, and he kept saying he was going to do it. He never
I'm going
did
to
it.
do it. I
All
always
right.
I say I'm going to do it. You're going to do it. But then what gets lost? Because of the album, and we mentioned knowing what's gonna. I mean, they start out with Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band, and then it transitions to Ringo singing with a little help from my friend. It's the we'll be giving that up because these are going to come from different time periods, different albums. But I still think we do the exercise, but we're bemoaning the fact that the album has gone away.
So let's talk about that. I mean,
Yeah.
so there are certain albums especially in the rock and the jazz world,
Hmm.
that spent a lot of time kind of crafting a perfect sequence of songs and of emotions that was meant to tell an overriding story. And so, you know, I think this became a big thing in rock when, during the 70s where you had the prog rock and you had, bands like Yes and Pink Floyd. They're trying to tell this overarching story, and it has an introduction, it has a climax, it has a conclusion, it has all this stuff to it. But as far as the albums themselves, there, there is something about taking these things as a whole rather than piecing them out. And that's one of the reasons why, some bands, either because they couldn't do it well or because they didn't want to, the idea of releasing songs individually, you're kind of ripping something out of context. So, what was your experience about digesting albums as a whole that you think is missing now?
Well, first of all, when you listen to something, and it can be anything, but if you like it and you listen to it time after time, you're going to create these expectations mentally of that next song, and it becomes part of your personal experience. But it was still crafted as a bunch of individual hit songs. But the ones that you just mentioned, like Pink Floyd, The Dark Side of the Moon, uh,
Mhm,
yeah, that's something that I mean, you listen to, and it has this incredible effect. And there's a moment where you hear this bell, and you wake up from being kind of drawn into something, and so they're messing with you constantly.
mhm,
Another one I was thinking is Jethro Tull and Aqualung,
mhm,
which is talking about, it's really rough and nasty guitar
mhm,
playing, and talking about a journey of faith, but very hard, and from the street, from a person who's kind of on the surface despicable, but not really, and
mhm.
so ambitious. I love the Who, and I love Tommy, and because there are these moments, the whole thing is very strange, but there are some high points that you can't really compete with, and but it's because of the context of those songs. Um, so I think there are a few, you know, but even in the '70s, when we had so much, most of those bands weren't the Who, they weren't the Stones, they didn't have that many songs to carry, an
Right.
album like that.
So maybe it's just an argument that doesn't really stand the test of time. When you consider the vast majority of albums, there was no grand master plan for most bands. They were looking to create enough songs to fill an album. How many times have you ever heard of a person talking about an album? So, oh, we needed one more song, so I just wrote something, and then it becomes the last bit of an album. But there's no desire to kind of keep it intact with the rest of the album. There's no reason for it to tie into the rest of the album. So if the overarching storyline that you see in some albums is not a prevailing quality, then what is the purpose of the album format? And if it's gone, then is it really that big of a loss if we're just consuming everything piecemeal by way of Spotify?
So this is kind of a history of technology, in a way. This question, from the in the '60s, '70s, '80s, even, you did put the needle down and you listened to all of it, and,
Mhm.
and so there was this continuity, and not this schizophrenia of want to listen to this or this or this, but you're going to listen to, say, Dire Straits. You're going to hear 25 minutes and probably another 25 minutes of Dire Straits before you shift to something else. And so as you're drinking or talking or whatever, there's this consistency to that experience. You move to the cassette tape. I mean, people started at that point making mixtapes a little bit where they could jump around, but still cassettes were, you could purchase a cassette. It was
We're
eight
trying to
track.
impress girls, so
That's right. Yeah, the 8-track tape, but the mixtape was starting to move towards Spotify. And I think when they had what was it called, Napster initially, where you
Yeah,
could download songs illegally, it really helped, with that mixtape because you could build really whatever you wanted. And then it moved to the CD, which seems a lot like the album. Again, you can listen to the whole CD, but you can move around a lot more. You can jump much easier from over a few things. And then eventually you could rip CDs, meaning you could put songs and make your own mixtape on a CD, and I'm sure you've done that
yeah.
as well. Um, and then now that suddenly we're on Spotify and these types of things, all it's set up for building a mixtape, but also they do this thing where where the algorithm determines, what song you're going to hear next. So it starts to kind of get into your song list and then it plays your other things. And that sounds perfect, but it isn't because your universe, you're in a closed system and it doesn't really bring you out. You're not suddenly going to hear something unexpected.
And so, but is that necessarily a bad thing? I mean, if someone listens to It's Too Late or Smackwater Jack or something that maybe was conceived as part of a larger thing, if we
Yeah.
hear it individually, have we really lost that much? If it's the case that if it's the case that this is where it's going and that it was never really a big predominant thing in the first place, in the end, have we really lost that much?
I think so. I mean, you drive a lot here, Miller. You take road trips. Are you able to blast your music in the car with your family?
Blast might be a strong word, but
Are you
I'm a believer in the person driving controls the audio.
okay? So if you're in that position, and you drive by yourself a lot too,
Yes.
um, there's a difference, listening to an album because you can do it now. You
Hmm.
can, listen to that Stones album, or any other from beginning to end, or you can play that kind of the curated road trip one that we
Hmm.
all have. Um, and they're different experiences. I think they're both valid. But there is something because you actually have this incredible opportunity with Spotify to access about any album ever.
Right.
And I don't know that people take advantage of that because they can listen to these Stones albums from beginning to end, no problem.
Hmm.
But do you tend to do that?
I do tend to do it only because the way I originally consumed the Rolling Stones
Mm.
was by albums. And so sometimes when I want to listen to the Stones, there's usually a particular because the Stones, like any other group that's been around a long time, went through phases. And so there are certain albums that are typified by certain phases or certain emotions or certain kind of feels to it. And so if I'm interested in a particular feel, I can't just say want to listen to the Stones, it's usually done in order to kind of create a certain feeling. And so the first thing that pops in my mind is a particular album.
Hmm?
And so I will listen to an album. Now, that said, I do have a playlist of the Stones, songs that are both big and not so big that for me kind of encapsulate what the Stones are in all matter of feelings and tones and emotions or what have you.
We've heard that in Germany or in Switzerland.
Maybe so, yeah.
A lot of
So
those real blues-based Stone songs going through Switzerland is pretty great.
I do still listen to it, but I wonder if the reason why the albums have suffered is because patience has suffered.
Yes.
And so we don't have time for the story, or we don't have patience for the story, or we don't have patience for a song that's not quite as on the tip of our tongue as the other songs are. We don't know them as well as we know the other songs on the album. So we just fast forward to the hits and then we move on.
Mhm.
And I wonder if patience is the reason why the album has died. I mean, I know it's not died, but I mean, but I wonder if that's why we don't consume it that way anymore because we just want to hear this constant same tone, same attitude, same feeling, and it doesn't matter where it comes from.
It's really interesting. If you're driving a more modern car, there's something that you can do with your left thumb where you hit an
Yes.
arrow and you get to the next track, which
The
means,
movement is almost imperceptible to anyone else in the car. It looks like it just magically happened, as if the
yeah,
car itself decided it wanted to change the
that's
song.
right. So you're not going to listen through something that's not like the greatest song you've ever heard in your life. You're going to go, oh, don't want that one, don't want that one. So yeah, there is something to that, and having control. Something my one of my sons said about the young folks today is that they hate, I think that's the word he used, they hate each other's playlists, all of them. It's not like they have some common thing and they bond. That no, everybody's lame and they're talking about each other, not just to say us, but they don't like each other's because they want that control, they want that left thumb, and they want to curate every second. So having to sit through somebody else's playlist, that used to be a way to get to know somebody. You play your music for them, and they kind of
Mhm.
know a little something, but there's this natural animosity, really harsh. You know, they listen to crap. And
Especially with the word hate. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
that's a strong indictment.
yeah. But I think there's something about having the remote, and that's the same thing applies to watching a full film, So yeah, I think you're right. This is feeding the attention span and the kind of the
Or lack
face.
thereof.
Yeah, right. And the Facebook idea that everybody is kind of the center of their own little universe. Uh,
Mhm.
and so they're not going to listen to these little songs on that Stones album, where they're going to go right to satisfaction,
Mhm.
and so they are missing something with that left thumb click, which probably happens a lot more than we can imagine.
Also, you could think about it in terms that people are less willing to listen to stuff that falls outside of their self-understood parameters about what they like.
Yeah.
And so they're not willing to test out new things. They're not willing to experience new things.
Yeah. I mean, if you listen to somebody else's music, you sometimes what's it called? You sort of smile and you're kind of going along with it, but you're not really there yet. Oh, that
Yeah.
was great. You know, but it takes time for songs, often, particularly the good ones, to grow on you. You don't just love them the first time you hear them.
Right.
We've and I think that something we benefited from was the radio. I don't know if they have radio anymore,
It's still there.
but but hearing these things, for 2, 3, 4 years all summer, and you really get a lot of listens of these songs, and they become part of, and learn the lyrics, and at that point, it sometimes catches on, even though it may not hit you right out of the gate. So imagine subjecting somebody to music without the
Mhm.
lyrics, because you don't process lyrics, the first time you hear something.
Yeah. So you're saying that the music is the primary focus of um I don't know. It's the first thing that hits a person when they hear a song, not so much the lyrics.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I share music with my daughter all the time, and we have a kind of a ritual where we'll each share each other.
Mm.
But yeah, the music part, and occasionally when something is so important to me, I'll make sure that the lyrics are on there at the same time, like uh,
Mhm.
um, like a Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
That's so crucial to get into the story.
Dress so fine, you do the funky chime in their prime, didn't you?
Yeah, that's that's greatness. But we're so old, you know. Yeah, it's we need to remind ourselves that we're like those. We have little arms, we're little
Mm.
sort of walking around the earth.
There's still a desire to push back a little bit. And with my daughter, she listens to some of the biggest crap I have ever
Oh,
heard in my
come on,
life.
man. Be nice to
It
us.
is horrific. It's mind numbing, some of the stuff she listens to. Now, strangely, she does have a appreciation for stuff that I would consider to be good, but it doesn't keep her from enjoying stuff that just seems to have no merit whatsoever. Now, I understand. I understand that I'm coming across a little bit like a dick right now, just because I'm like all the old people like in the 60s and 70s. There's no rock and rolls, just the same kind of attitude where you totally dismiss a whole genre of music. But I can't help but think I'm right though. So- and so there will be times that I will try to get my daughter to listen to some things, but I do so kind of understanding that she will have little to no patience for it if it does not hit her upside the head within the first 3 seconds of the song.
Well, picture that car ride with you and your family, and then there are three people in there. One person has control of what's happening. The others have either ear pods or full-on headphones.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that everybody is in their own musical world, and I think that's another thing that we're losing is this shared experience. You know, you have people at the house, you're all listening to one thing. It's
Mhm.
hard. I mean, you've done this. You've had playlists going on at parties,
Yeah.
but you think, what effect is this playlist on everybody there? You know,
It's the purpose of it is to have no effect.
right.
The purpose of the playlist during a party is just to have it's just to have like a buzz in the background.
Yeah.
It's just that, what was that um Queen song about, don't let it become just background noise, just the
Yeah.
idea that the music is more important than that, but that's how we often consign it. We consign it to something that in a rare lapse in conversation, someone go, "Oh, this is the Stones," and then you go right back into the conversation and you don't really pay attention to it after that.
And that's tragic because, in the 70s, that was not the purpose of that music.
Right.
It was much louder, first of all, that they
Right.
played it louder, they cranked it up, and it was a big deal. The parties were louder there, and the music was important. Now it's been domesticated, you know,
You
gen
might as well play music.
that's why I mean, the Stones particularly. I mean, I love the Stones. There's no, I mean, I'm serious. I've never had any, they're right there. Um,
Mm.
but whenever one of their songs makes it into a commercial, first of all, it's played quieter on TV, and I just
Mhm.
can't stand it because I mean, they were rough and edgy, and they need to be played loud. And so, taking something like that and putting it into a little advertisement for a product, I can't do it.
Well, it's sterilizing the music.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So it shouldn't be played quietly, and so that's why I object to. And if you're going to do a Stones playlist, commit to it. You know,
Yes.
break out the records, break out the big ass speakers. You know, that's we had better sound systems back then too.
Mhm.
Think about it. We thought a lot about those speakers and the whole system. Now, if it's playing through the TV speakers or something. Doesn't matter anymore.
It is shocking, and maybe it's yet another sign of how music has been relegated to a certain extent. The fact
Mhm.
that there has not been, outside of like Bose, who consistently tends to be better than everybody else, but it seems like that the lack of technology that has gone into developing better speakers
Mhm.
is perhaps goes hand in hand with the idea that music does not have the same prime importance that it used to, where in the 70s you listen to a song in the 70s, you listen to the original recording
Yeah.
of music in the 70s, that concert footage,
Hmm.
and it is shocking how clear, how crisp, how well captured
Hmm.
that music tends to be. And then you try to get footage from an concert like 2 years ago, and then it's almost incomprehensible. And so it seems like, as far as like recording and speakers and things of that nature, we seem to have gone backwards with that. And maybe that is connected to the fact that people just do not consume music the way they used to. There's
Yeah.
no demand for it.
That's right. There's something about I mean, you remember you could touch the speaker and kind of feel you could feel that sound pulsating. And but yeah, it was clear, it was loud, it was and you spent a lot of money, getting those speakers, and it was a point of of pride. And yeah, so that I think that's a interesting example. And even they even had really good headphones back then. I
Mm,
mean, I remember putting on headphones that were expensive and you could hear everything. And I mean, they did a lot of recording where it kind of went from one side to the other.
right.
Um, you can only capture so much on one of those little earplug things, you know?
Mm.
And so I think a lot of people listening with those iPods, or what are they called? I,
They're
yeah,
called something.
iPods, the little
Yeah,
headphone things. You
yeah.
can't contain, the Who in a little thing that, I mean, you'd break your eardrum, right? Uh,
Well, it is yet another thing. It's another element of life that we sometimes bemoan about and miss the way it was before. But certainly, still good music is being produced. None of it my daughter listens to, but there's still good music that's being produced, and hopefully we can kind of come back around. Maybe the hipsters can bring the album back. You know, they're bringing everything else back. Maybe they can bring the album back. Who
well,
knows? But
you have one, don't you? You bought yourself a record player.
I got a record player, and I'm actually in the process of building a shelf for it. So
Good.
we'll see how it goes. So
Get some big ass speakers, Herr Miller.
I'll put that in the Amazon search bar, big ass speakers, and
Well,
see
the
what comes up.
Pioneer, remember?
Okay, yeah, I can
You
remind
could use them to put your beer on too.
Oh, geez. All right. Well, enough of that. We're wrapping up for today. But thank you for listening. We appreciate it. And I thank you, Hair Dr. Bourgeois.
Okay, Herr Miller, this was fun, and we're getting older by the minute.
Yes, but wiser.
All right, out.